Hello. Um, okay. Well, thank you for inviting me. I look forward to this day that we're about to have. I don't know exactly where we will go, but as you can see, I have a hard drive with most of my work on it, so we can pop in and out of different films or different experiments as we go along. I mean, a day is not enough to obviously cover everything, so it will be a little bit improvised based on what anybody is interested in talking about or hearing about. Um, I think we decided at least our conversation would go chronologically. So we'd start this morning by talking about early things, early filmmaking, adolescence, stuff like that. Not really. Okay. Um, and then move towards collaborations and some of the bigger projects in the afternoon. And if we still have time at the very end of the day, I would set up the what I call image mixing instrument, which is the computer software system that I was involved in designing for performance, which you can see some results of in the gallery over there. So to start, this is easy because I can just read something, and it's a text I wrote after making Gambling Gods and LSD when a French magazine. Yeah, so a magazine asked me that question that you sometimes get asked, which is why do you make films? So this was my answer at that time. Let's see. So this was for a magazine called Vertigo in Paris. I'm asked to send a few notes about something, anything, that I might be doing right now by an editor of this fine magazine. I have only a few hours, and I stop to gather my thoughts to see if such a thing might really be possible. Often I'm asked what it is that I do, or how do I do what I do, and often the simplicity of the question takes me aback. I do what most people do, trying to survive while at the same time attempting to see clearly, learning and sharing insights that hopefully are useful to the positive growth of others besides myself. I use images and sounds as mediums of exploration and meditation. I'm not that interested in mimicking existing forms and structures just for the satisfaction of construction or commercial gain. Rather, I try to work at the limits of my understanding, knowledge, and perception, invoking processes and mysteries that I don't fully comprehend. The forms sometimes tend towards drama or documentary, sometimes musical, but generally I like to think they are actually unclassifiable, determined strictly by the nature of the subject they deal with. Defining films by genre, I see as an oversimplification of our greatly varied perceptions on reality. Limiting our vision to slottable, supposedly marketable forms is akin to denying freedom of speech. I greatly respect the improvisational approach, feeling that there's discovered and learned by not letting the intellect dominate a process. I'll work from a set of themes rather than a predetermined, pre-scripted blueprint. I go out into the world, tuning myself like a radio receiver, building and developing my responses into a project, a film, an event, a picture, a conversation. The last big project I did like this ended as a 3-hour film called Gambling Gods and LSD. Its themes, although never stated, included the illusion of safety, the denial of death, transcendence, and our relationship to nature. After that 5-year-long process, one of my main realizations was simply stated in a voiceover towards the end of the film. Maybe there's a difference between looking for something and just looking. When you're a part of what you are looking at, and it looks back at you, and you look back at it. Today, a couple of years later, I have the good fortune to be working on a film with the 99-year-old ever-lucid chemist and discoverer of LSD, Albert Hofmann. He references Goethe. Born to look, destined to see. There are a series of distinct stages in the development from looking to seeing. In the beginning, there is the simple perception of an object without being aware of it, without its arousing our interest. The second stage involves the object attracting our attention. In the third stage, the object gets precisely observed and explored. Here begins the thought process of scientific inquiry. But the highest stage of observation occurs when the fundamental relationship to an object, and even to all that surrounds it, loses the border separating subject and object, observer and observed. When the perception that there is a difference between me and the outer world is suspended, and I become one with the world and its elementary forces. This is the condition of love. And thus he manages to enlighten me a little bit more about what and why I do what I do.
Thank you for sharing this with us. So, what you just described, we here today recognize as a vision. It would be interesting to see how you developed it with from the beginning, from the time you went to study film, and so how can one develop a vision? Challenge, but I want you to answer.
Well, I don't think, at least in my case, I don't think that my objective was to create a vision. I was just responding in a certain way to the world, to growing up. If you talk about the beginning, I was just interacting with the process of becoming a person, and if I go back to my high school days, I was kind of a little bit of an outsider. I was shy. I liked David Bowie a lot. In fact, I quite identified with David Bowie in the film The Man Who Fell to Earth. I don't know if anybody knows that film, where it was made by Nicholas Roeg, and he arrives on Earth as an alien, and the whole film has a very special way of looking at things, looking at the character and looking at society, and that was one of the films early on that I really identified with, that actually prompted me to think in terms of possibly making a film. But before that, my parents had thankfully forced me to play the piano when I was 7 years old, and it was classical training for 7 years on a piano, and I didn't actually like it very much. I didn't like the discipline involved. I didn't particularly like the music, but what I did like was the ability to use a keyboard and think at the same time. So kind of improvise with the notes and create whatever melodies, but in a way tell stories. And I would, as I was improvising, I would visualize things. But I wasn't doing this again to create a vision. This was just like a way of interacting, of finding some joy, maybe. So I eventually quit playing the piano when my parents said I didn't have to anymore. And that's when I really started playing the piano. Because I was really free to explore it on my own terms. And then that was paralleled by the good fortune of being in a high school that had a Super 8 film camera and offered the possibility to students to work with Super 8. And as soon as I started doing that, I saw, or I felt, the connection of what I'd been doing musically with the piano kind of merging into images and sounds and composition, and also a way to engage with the world moving forward. And I decided at 16, quite early, that, oh, this is what I would like to do, because film seemed to me to be a medium that could accompany me through life and would allow me to meet different kinds of people, explore different kinds of ideas. Basically, you could do whatever you wanted because you were making a film. It was really a medium of exploration. So that's kind of the roots of it.
And you always point out that for you a film is a music and vice versa. The music is still very present in all of your films. So can we say that you actually felt how to edit, how to structure the film by improvisations on piano?
Yeah, I think it had a huge influence.
Can you explain it a little bit more? Because maybe here are some musicians or aspiring musicians. How did you do that? How did you do that?
Well, I mean, I think if we talk about music, music is one of the few art forms that's very hard to destroy. It's kind of unadulterated, because there's something about music, how when you hear something, it goes right here. You know, it very seldom, maybe for professionals, it goes here first and then here, or here and here. But mostly when we hear music, we feel an emotion, we dance. It gives us a mood. It evokes a memory, and you know, filmmaking can be many things. Obviously, filmmaking is used a lot historically as a depiction of theater. You know, it's basically taking a stage, taking actors, taking drama, and filming that story. But that's partially what I'm interested in. But I'm more interested in the potential of film working like music, in the way that it goes inside you, and that it can actually take an audience, or it can represent anything that's playing out psychologically inside of you, because it is basically a display of your senses, of image and sound, at least. So it doesn't always have to be character driven and story based. It can be, you know, some kind of emotional passage that is very similar to music. So I think that answers the question.
But there is one big difference between music and film, I think, because when you're playing music, you immediately also listen to the music. But when you're making film, you have to transform yourself into the audience later to watch it. You know, you cannot enjoy it immediately as you can enjoy the music. So, but I want to ask you, I saw that you also started with photography, at least you studied photography. So I wanted to ask you, which was the first thing, the photography or the film? And if the main, is the first impulse made before cinema, was the fact really that you were shy, that you were trying to hide behind something and look to do in the world with through some, through some medium, that was the the first impulse to take in the hand your camera and start shooting, or it was really something to the wish to create something.
Well, the very first images I made were with a little, they're called a Brownie Hawkeye camera. They're like these plastic cameras that would shoot negative. And I do remember that. I mean, I wasn't really trying, again, to express or create a vision or anything like that. I was just fascinated by this recording of time and creation of memory without, being able to say that, because that I was probably 6 years old or something when that happened. But I know that there was that awareness, that magic that photography and film have of recording any particular moment. That got to me somehow. I mean, in terms of the second part of your question of hiding behind the medium, when I went into film school, that was conscious. I also thought, oh, it's a good medium because you can completely craft this experience, but you don't have to be there as a person when you present it. And I naively thought that I could go through life without having to talk about my films, and here I am, right? So that didn't work. As a filmmaker, you really do. I'll do a lot of talking, and you have to represent your work, and it's part of how your films get seen. And I hadn't factored that in, but my attraction was that it was very personal, and I thought, you could just make the film, and it would travel by itself.
That's strange because your films, I saw quite a lot of different directors, but your films are really special, really peculiar. So it's strange that somebody is making such films that doesn't want to to talk about them, because it's really, you need to explain a little bit.
Yeah, I didn't know that back then.
So maybe now it's the time that we little bit just flow towards the Lancelot freely. So it's the first short we are going to see. Can you tell us a little bit about the backstaging of Lancelot? Who is Lancelot?
Yeah, so I never show this film. In fact, I have to watch it because I can't remember it. This was an exercise in film school, like halfway through a 5-year program. This was the let's make a documentary exercise. So in some ways, it's the first, I would say, traditional documentary that I made. And Lancelot was my high school friend. Going back, no, not even high school, before high school, like grade 5 and 6. And he was kind of, you mentioned the word terrorist in the catalog. He's a real terrorist. And I also made my very first Super 8 film around the time I was inspired by David Bowie and Nicholas Roeg. And he's a character in that film, which is a story about a boy who buys the dream of death from a gypsy on the street. And anyway, that's background.
Yeah.
That was several years before making this film, when I decided to visit. His name used to be Kevin Jameson, but he changed it to Lancelot Freely, and he also changed his character quite radically. And so this is kind of a film that is also a meeting of an old childhood friend, really.
I read in a book or somewhere I think Bruce McDonald, who said that Lancelot is kind of your alter ego. Is it?
No, I don't. That's Bruce's idea. I don't think
Okay.
so.
So just let's watch it then.